No one ever tells you that the hardest part of decluttering isn't what you let go of, it's what you remember. For most of us over 60, every drawer is a time capsule. It's not just things, it's moments, people, promises we made to ourselves. For Eloise Turner, 72, a retired nurse who spent her life caring for others, the house she once called comfort has started to feel like a quiet weight. Each corner carries 40 years of laughter, love, and loss. There's the coffee mug her husband used every morning, the cardigan her granddaughter once borrowed, the recipe book marked by Sunday dinners that no longer happen. She's practical and kind, but lately, when she tries to clean, she stops, not from fatigue, but because every object asks the same question: are you ready to let me go? What Eloise doesn't know yet is that this isn't really about organizing. It's about rediscovering who she is now. Decluttering, for her, isn't just clearing space, it's confronting time. And maybe that's what makes it so hard. Because when you touch the things that built your life, you're also touching the parts of yourself that time has quietly changed. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like it's holding onto you more than you're holding onto it? That's the quiet truth so many of us live with. The home meant to protect us can start to feel like it's keeping us still. Before we go deeper, if this already hits home, don't just hit that new hype button. You get 3 free hypes every week, and every one helps real senior voices like ours rise above the noise so more people can find comfort, clarity, and peace in the homes they've spent a lifetime creating. Truth 1. Decluttering feels like grief. Eloise began where most of us would, the bedroom closet. It wasn't supposed to be emotional, she just wanted to clear a little space, maybe move a few hangers, make the shelves look lighter. But when her hand brushed against her late husband's jacket, the one still carrying the faint scent of cedar and aftershave, everything stopped. She'd promised herself for years she'd box it up, maybe donate it, but every time she tried, her heart whispered, not yet. That's the hidden part no one talks about. Decluttering at this stage of life isn't just about tidying up, it's about touching the pieces of your story. Every object holds a heartbeat. The scarf from their trip to Maine, the coffee mug he used every morning, the anniversary card written in his uneven handwriting near the end. Each one whispers, remember me. And Eloise did. Decluttering, she realized, wasn't organization, it was remembrance. It wasn't about making her house look better. It was about giving her heart permission to feel, to grieve, to heal. Every item she touched pulled her back to a moment she didn't know she'd been carrying so tightly. That's why decluttering can feel like grief, because it forces you to face the truth that love leaves fingerprints on everything it touches. When you start to sort through your things, it's not the clutter that overwhelms you, it's the memories that breathe inside them. And grief, for people like Eloise, doesn't vanish with time. It lingers in the small, ordinary things. The coat on the hook, the slippers by the bed, the recipe book that still smells faintly like cinnamon. But here's what's often missed. Grief doesn't mean you can't move forward. It means you love deeply enough to have something worth remembering. Eloise learned not to rush. When the memories came, she let them. She didn't scold herself for slowing down. She didn't try to stay strong. She sat in the quiet and listened. That's the real work of decluttering, listening to what each piece of your life has to say before you decide what belongs in your future. So if you start cleaning and suddenly find yourself holding something that makes you stop, don't push past it. That's not a distraction. That's healing happening in real time. Have you ever started cleaning and found yourself lost in a memory instead? Maybe a photo, or an old birthday card, pulled you somewhere unexpected. That moment isn't weakness, it's connection reminding you that your story still matters. Thousands of seniors face this same pause, that tug between the life behind them and the space ahead. The truth is, decluttering in your later years isn't about clearing shelves, it's about honoring seasons. It's learning that love can stay, even when the things don't. Eloise discovered that letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding love in a new form, lighter, freer, still here. The jacket may leave the closet, but the warmth it carried will always live in her hands. And what came next wasn't sadness, it was something unexpected, a small, steady realization that changed how she saw everything she owned, and everything she still wanted to become. Truth 2. Memories don't live in things, they live in you. Eloise didn't plan on changing her approach that day, but something inside her shifted. After hours of sorting and reliving, she realized she wasn't holding on to the items because she needed them. She was holding on to them because she thought they were the only way to keep her memories safe. The scarf reminded her of her honeymoon in Maine. The chipped teacup reminded her of long mornings with her husband. The perfume bottle, almost empty, reminded her of who she used to be when she still dressed up for dinners out. But standing there, surrounded by piles of things, Eloise finally asked herself, what if the memory doesn't live in the object at all? What if it's always been living in me? That question changed everything. She picked up her phone, opened the recorder app, and started speaking. One story per item. This was his fishing hat, she said softly. He never caught much, but he loved being out there. Then she smiled, for the first time that day, really smiled. Because the moment she told the story, the weight of the object lifted. The item didn't hold the memory anymore, she did. For years, she believed her home was her history book. But now she understood. The memories weren't in the pages, they were in her. We spend decades collecting things, building walls of sentiment around them, convinced that if we lose the item, we lose the moment. But that's never been true. The real keepsake is the story, the laughter, the lesson, the emotion you can still feel even without the object in front of you. When you tell the story, you give it life again, and you free yourself from having to guard the object. That's not loss, that's legacy. Eloise started a new habit that day, a voice diary. Each week, she'd pick one object, record its memory, then decide if it still needed to stay. Sometimes she'd keep it. Sometimes she'd let it go. But either way, she captured the essence, her own voice, her tone, her emotion. She was preserving not just a memory, but her spirit, her presence, her humanity. And she started thinking, what if her children could listen to these one day? What if they heard her voice telling the stories behind every little thing they never understood? That's when she realized, her voice would outlast any keepsake. That's the lesson so many of us miss. The memory's value doesn't fade when the object is gone. The heart remembers more than the hands ever could. For those of us over 60, surrounded by a lifetime of I might need this someday, maybe the question isn't what to throw away, maybe it's what to share. You don't need shelves full of proof that your life was full. You just need to start telling your stories while they still belong to you. So here's something to think about. If you could save one memory forever, which one would you choose? Whose voice would you want to keep? Because one day, that voice, your voice, might be what someone else holds on to. Eloise found that her phone had become her new memory box, small, invisible, powerful. Every recording was a piece of her heart preserved without taking up space. The clutter was shrinking, but her sense of meaning was growing. Her home was becoming lighter, yet somehow richer. And as she recorded one final story for the day, she looked around and saw something she hadn't noticed before. Not everything she'd kept came from love. Some things, she realized, came from fear. Fear of emptiness. Fear of being forgotten. And that's where the next truth begins. Truth 3, clutter protects you. Until it traps you. For years Eloise told herself she liked a lived-in home. A few stacks on the kitchen table, boxes in the hallway. But slowly she noticed how she'd begun to move around the house differently. She avoided the guest room because it was full of unopened boxes. She found herself making excuses when friends called, saying she was tired, when really she didn't want anyone to see the rooms she'd been postponing. It wasn't laziness, it was protection. The clutter had become armor, a soft wall that kept the absence from feeling sharp. When she was busy rearranging and sorting, she could ignore the evenings that suddenly felt too long. She could fill the quiet with tasks instead of sitting with what had been lost. Then one afternoon she paused and saw the truth plainly. Her home wasn't full of memories so much as avoidance. Every pile was a postponement, every closed door a silent promise to herself that she'd deal with it someday. What had started as comfort had become confinement. The stacks that once felt harmless had narrowed paths, hid the light, and took time from the living parts of her day. Clutter didn't just cover surfaces, it covered possibility. A dining room that used to welcome family now stayed empty. The neighbor who used to call with a casserole came less often because invitations were quieter. This is the cost few mention. Objects can become excuses to not change. They keep grief at arm's length but also keep joy at arm's length. If you're honest, is there a drawer you close and avoid? A room you skirt by because it makes your chest tighten? That avoidance often matters more than the things inside. Eloise opened the guest room door and didn't race to clear it out. She sat, breathed, and said aloud, "I see what I've been doing." That clarity was the turning point. Awareness came before action. Once she named the pattern, she started small: one shelf, one box, one letter. She learned to replace protection with presence. Instead of piling things to cover the quiet, she left a small chair by a window and sat there sometimes, letting sunlight be company. Clutter had been protecting her from feeling, but it had trapped her in old patterns. Letting go wasn't betrayal, it was reclaiming life. What came next wasn't merely emotional, it became practical, clearing pathways so she could move safely, opening rooms so she could invite people back, and choosing items that supported the life she wanted now. This truth is painful because it asks you to admit the reason you've kept things, not for the items themselves, but to hold the shape of a life that's changed. Recognizing that lets you unhook from the past and choose how to live going forward. If you're reading this and feeling awkward about where to start, try this small step. Pick one box, set a timer for 15 minutes, open it, select one item to record its story, and then choose whether it can go. That tiny practice builds courage, momentum, and the kind of quiet pride that grows each time you reclaim a little more of your space and yourself. Truth 4. Decluttering isn't about minimalism, it's about mobility. Eloise stumbled slightly while carrying a heavy box toward the hallway. She caught herself against the wall, chuckled softly, and said, "Guess I'm not 40 anymore." It wasn't a big fall, just a small wobble, but it left her heart racing for a moment. And that's when it hit her, this wasn't about being tidy or trendy anymore. It was about being safe. About making sure she could keep living in her home with confidence. Decluttering, she realized, wasn't some social media challenge or minimalist aesthetic. It was a practical act of self-respect, a way to stay strong, steady, and independent. Decluttering isn't a trend. It's how you make space to keep moving, to stay healthy, and to protect your freedom. The truth most people don't talk about is that clutter quietly limits your body before you even notice it. Every box on the floor becomes a small risk. Every crowded corner a small delay. Every unnecessary piece of furniture a potential obstacle. For younger people, clutter is inconvenient. For older adults, it can quietly become dangerous. Eloise started to see her home differently that day, not as a museum of memories, but as a space she had to move through safely. She cleared the walkway to the bathroom. She moved her most used items to waist height so she didn't have to bend or stretch. She even swapped a few sharp-edged tables for round ones. None of it was about looks, it was about freedom, freedom to move without hesitation, without fear. As she worked, she realized how many of her things were serving the past instead of her present. The extra coffee table that always bruised her shin. The chair she never sat in. The pile of magazines she kept meaning to read. They weren't signs of comfort, they were quiet barriers. She began asking herself one simple question before keeping anything. Does this help me move through my life, or does it slow me down? That question changed everything. Mobility-based decluttering isn't glamorous, but it's powerful. It's about keeping your home ready for who you are now, not who you were years ago. It's choosing a home that supports your body, not one that silently works against it. For Eloise, that shift gave her something better than a cleaner house. It gave her confidence. She stopped feeling anxious about tripping. She stopped putting off chores because of fear. Her home finally felt peaceful, not because it was spotless, but because it was safe. And the beauty of it? Every small change multiplied her freedom. For seniors, that's the true heart of decluttering. It's not about having less, it's about living more. What's one thing in your home that makes getting around harder, but you keep it anyway? Maybe it's that end table you always bump into, or the boxes near the stairs you step around. The next time you notice one, ask yourself if it's serving you or silently slowing you down. Start small, one path, one corner, one chair. Eloise learned that clearing even a few steps of space changed how she felt walking through her home. Each clear path became a quiet reminder, I'm still capable. I'm still in control. I'm still here. And though she felt lighter with every box she moved, she didn't know that her next challenge would be far harder, one that had nothing to do with safety or mobility. It was something every parent eventually faces, and it would test her heart in ways no amount of decluttering ever could. Truth 5. Your kids don't want most of it, and that hurts. Eloise stood at the dining table, unwrapping her wedding china for the first time in years. The faint gold trim still shimmered in the afternoon light, each plate holding a quiet story from her past. She smiled, remembering dinners with her husband, laughter with friends, and moments that felt too precious to ever fade. For decades, she'd pictured passing it all down to her daughter, a symbol of love, family, and tradition. When her daughter came by for coffee, Eloise finally offered it. "I want you to have this," she said gently. "It's part of our story." Her daughter smiled warmly but hesitated. "Mom," she said softly, "I love that you want me to have it, but I really don't have the space." The words were kind, but they hurt more than Eloise expected. She tried to smile, to hide the ache in her chest, but deep down, it felt like something meaningful had just been turned away. Not the plates, the memories. That night, Eloise sat quietly at the table, the box still open in front of her. It took her a while to understand that her daughter hadn't rejected her, she was simply living differently. Smaller home. Faster pace. Fewer things. She didn't need to inherit her mother's life to love her mother's story. And that realization changed everything. Our children don't need our things, they need our presence, our laughter, our stories. They need the warmth behind the object, not the object itself. The next morning, Eloise picked up one plate, traced its faded gold rim, and smiled. "Your father spilled red wine on this during our first anniversary dinner," she whispered. "We laughed so hard we forgot dessert." She wrote that story on a small note and slipped it beneath the plate. That was the piece she decided to keep, not as clutter, but as connection. The rest she let go of, knowing the memory was safe where it always truly lived, inside her. That moment sparked an idea. She started a small story box, filled not with things, but with handwritten notes, recipes, funny mistakes, favorite songs, lessons learned. It was light, simple, and personal. Her daughter didn't have to inherit a lifetime of objects, she'd inherit her mother's heart in words. Have your kids ever said they don't want something you've kept for them? How did that make you feel? You're not alone if it hurt. But maybe, like Eloise, you'll find comfort in realizing that love doesn't have to be passed down in boxes. It can be passed down in conversation, in shared memories, in laughter. Because when you let go of the weight of what you thought they needed, you make room for what truly connects you. The china no longer represented rejection, it represented release, the freedom to hold onto what mattered most without holding it physically. Eloise felt lighter that day, freer, and more at peace. But even with her heart settling, she didn't know that her next challenge would be the hardest one yet, a moment when she'd almost give up, and one that might sound all too familiar. Truth 6. You'll want to quit halfway, that's the test. Halfway through her decluttering journey, Eloise's house looked worse than when she started. Boxes covered the floor. Papers fanned across the table. Old blankets and photo albums were stacked in corners like small mountains. It felt like she'd unleashed chaos instead of creating order. She stood in the middle of it all, holding her head in her hands, wondering why she even started. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "I should have left it alone." That's the moment no one talks about, the part where the excitement fades, the energy dips, and the mess seems endless. But that's also the truth of progress. It always gets harder before it gets better. The mess isn't failure, it's proof that you're doing the work. Every decision, every item, every memory pulled from a drawer means you're moving forward. But for Eloise, standing there surrounded by piles of her life, it didn't feel like progress, it felt like defeat. She'd been so focused at the start, full of motivation and purpose. Yet somewhere between the first and fifth box, the process became heavier than she expected. Each decision seemed to demand an emotional toll. Keep, donate, discard. Each choice felt like another tiny goodbye. That's what people forget about decluttering. It's not just physical work, it's emotional endurance. It's holding the weight of a lifetime in your hands and trying to decide what still belongs in your present. Eloise sat on the couch, looking at the clutter she'd just created, and tears filled her eyes. "I can't do this," she said quietly. But then, after a long breath, she realized she didn't need to do everything, she just needed to do something. The next morning, she made a smaller goal. Not the whole room. Just one drawer. She started with the nightstand beside her bed, a place she hadn't touched in years. Inside were receipts, pens, old glasses, and a few letters she'd never had the heart to reread. It wasn't easy, but it was manageable. By the end of the day, she'd cleared one drawer, and something surprising happened. The feeling of defeat began to fade. A little pride crept in. A little momentum. The mess still existed, but now it looked like progress in disguise. That's the quiet secret of decluttering. The hardest point is right before the breakthrough. The overwhelm you feel is the sign that you're not avoiding your past anymore, you're sorting through it. You're facing what most people never do. So when you feel like quitting, remember, it's not that you're failing. It's that you're right on the edge of change. Have you ever quit halfway through something that mattered? What brought you back? Maybe it was a friend, a memory, or just the simple thought that you'd regret giving up. The truth is, persistence doesn't have to look like heroism. Sometimes, it's just one small drawer at a time. That's what Eloise learned, that progress doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in quiet, consistent steps, the kind no one applauds but that transform everything over time. By the end of the week, her home still wasn't perfect. But she was lighter, freer, steadier. She'd learned that quitting isn't the opposite of success, it's a temptation that visits right before it arrives. And when she finally finished, standing in her newly cleared living room, she didn't just see open space, she saw proof that she'd kept a promise to herself. What came next, though, was the hardest truth of all, one that would shift how she saw not just her home, but her entire life. Truth 7. Decluttering isn't about death, it's about choosing life. When Eloise finally stood in the middle of her home, something felt different. The air seemed lighter, the silence gentler, the light spilling across the floor brighter than she remembered. The heavy feeling that used to sit quietly in her chest was gone. What surrounded her now wasn't emptiness, it was space. For the first time in years, she could walk from room to room without stepping around boxes, without bumping into reminders of the past she'd been too afraid to face. It wasn't that she'd erased her history, she'd simply given herself room to breathe in her present. At first, Eloise thought decluttering meant preparing to go, simplifying so her children wouldn't have to handle the mess someday. That's what everyone assumed at her age, after all. "You're getting ready," her neighbor said kindly one afternoon. Eloise smiled, but inside she knew that wasn't true. She wasn't preparing to go. She was preparing to live. Decluttering, she realized, wasn't about leaving behind, it was about showing up. It wasn't an ending, it was a reawakening. The act of letting go had opened something unexpected inside her, space for possibility. For joy. For life. She started spending more time in her living room, where the sunlight reached further now that the curtains were open. She invited her book club over for tea, something she hadn't done in years. They laughed, swapped stories, and stayed until the light outside dimmed. For the first time in a long while, her house didn't feel like a museum of memories. It felt alive, like it had been waiting for her to come back to it. Decluttering had turned out not to be about death at all. It was about choosing life. It was about deciding, every day, that the space around her should reflect the life still inside her, not the years that had passed, but the moments still ahead. The things she kept were the ones that helped her move forward, her favorite chair, her journals, a framed photo of her husband smiling in the sunlight. But gone were the items that whispered loss. The house no longer echoed with ghosts, it hummed with energy, warmth, and freedom. The lesson was clear, letting go isn't the end of your story. It's the start of a new one. For Eloise, it meant rediscovering herself not as someone winding down, but as someone awakening again. That's the quiet truth about decluttering that no one talks about. It's not an act of closure, it's an act of courage. It takes bravery to look at a lifetime of belongings and say, I am still here. I am still living. For seniors like Eloise, the process isn't about shrinking life, it's about expanding it. By releasing what no longer serves you, you make room for what does. Laughter, connection, freedom, ease. You give yourself permission to live fully in the time you have now. Every cleared space becomes an invitation to read, to rest, to dance, to host, to breathe. If you could start fresh tomorrow, one room, one space, one new beginning, where would you begin? Maybe it's not your house at all. Maybe it's your routine, your mindset, your willingness to dream again. Because the truth is, choosing to live lightly isn't just about cleaning up, it's about showing up, for yourself, for today, for whatever comes next. Eloise's home now reflects that truth. It's filled with fewer things but more life. And as she sits with a cup of tea by the window, the afternoon light spilling in, she smiles, not because everything is gone, but because everything she kept truly belongs. She's no longer surrounded by ghosts. She's surrounded by possibility. Eloise didn't just clear her home. She cleared her heart. And that's what decluttering truly is, not about losing things, but about finding yourself again. It's about creating space for peace where there used to be pressure, about trading chaos for clarity, and about realizing that your life is still unfolding, no matter your age or how many boxes you filled. As Eloise stood in her now lightened home, she looked around and felt something she hadn't in years: calm. Not the quiet of emptiness, but the peace of belonging. She wasn't surrounded by clutter anymore, she was surrounded by choice. Every item left in her home carried intention, not obligation. Every corner reflected the life she was still living, open, gentle, and full of purpose. The journey had tested her patience, stirred her emotions, and challenged her strength, but it gave her something far greater in return: freedom. Freedom from guilt, from the weight of someday, from the false belief that letting go means forgetting. She learned that letting go simply means making room, for connection, for comfort, for joy. And that's what I want for you too. Because decluttering isn't just about homes, it's about hearts. It's about making peace with your story and giving yourself permission to live lighter and love deeper. If this spoke to you, hit like and share it with someone who's ready to start their own next chapter. Maybe it's a friend who's been saying, "I'll get to it one day," or a family member who's been holding on to things because they're afraid of what it means to let go. Sometimes, all someone needs is to hear a voice that says, "You're not alone. You can start today." And before you go, here's how you can take one small step to help our community grow, because what we're building here isn't just a channel. It's a circle of understanding, courage, and renewal. If this story touched you, don't just hit that new hype button. It's YouTube's way of lifting up real senior voices, and you get 3 free hypes every week. Each one helps videos like this reach more people who need to hear them. Here's how to do it. Step 1. On your YouTube app, scroll down and swipe left on the comment preview carousel until you see the hype button. Step 2. Tap hype. Step 3. Choose how many points you want to give. Step 4. Confirm, and you're done. Every hype you give helps this message climb higher, so more people over 60 can find strength and inspiration through stories like Eloise's. It only takes a moment, but it can make a lifetime of difference. While you're at it, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week, we share new stories that remind us we're not defined by what we let go of, but by what we still have to give. This community, Wise Aging Seniors, is more than a place to watch videos. It's a place to feel seen, understood, and encouraged. Together, we're proving that getting older doesn't mean slowing down. It means growing wiser, freer, and braver. So go ahead, tap hype, hit like, and make sure you're subscribed. Share this with someone who needs a spark of courage today. Together, we're building a lighter, kinder, wiser world. One drawer, one memory, one story at a time.